So what I've been asked to do is just sort of set the scene a little bit with a few topics, which I know that we're going to sort of explore a bit further during the panel session. I went to Singapore a couple of weeks ago with our new JLL London City Logistics Group on a bit of a fact-finding mission. If you haven't been to Singapore and you really want to see how multi-storey and intensive logistics operations really work, go there. They've got shortage of land. They are, they're a gateway to Asia. There's huge importing and exporting going on, and somehow they've got to come up with solutions. So nearly 100% of the buildings now that are in Singapore are multi-level. We found one example of a single-storey shed left in Singapore, and a lot of it is government influence. So everything has got to be intensified. So just on the left-hand side, that is they call that a flatted factory. That is so we're calling it multi-level, and that is all industrial and warehousing on a number of levels, and it is all cargo lift service. So there's no vehicles at higher level, multi-occupied, quite a lot of smaller units, but a whole plethora of usage, including a lot of freight, a lot of logistics, a lot of e-tailer, e-commerce activities. The middle one, that's Greenwich Drive, and if you are going to go to Singapore, you want to go to Greenwich Drive. That is really where a lot of the main 3PLs are based, and they are in a multi-storey format, where that photograph, I'm actually in the DHL headquarters building, which is 100,000 square meters, or a million square feet in my language. So I'm on the third floor. I'm looking over that Seva Logistics 4-storey multi-storey building, and they have ramp access, so the HGVs can get up to the top floor. What I would say is that if you're on the third floor, you wouldn't know you're suspended. You'd think you're on the ground floor. This one here, this is the Toll Group building. That is a million square feet. That's probably the state-of-the-art building in Singapore at the moment. And I took this because that is the third floor of the building. That is the 12-meter high clear warehouse, and they are storing wine up to the ceiling. Now, in the UK, one of the issues that everyone seems to have about multi-storey format is floor loading. Well, they're defying our logic in the UK that they are storing heavy goods on the third floor. It's 25 kilonewtons per square meter floor loading, and they're storing wine, which is extremely heavy. So that's just a little sort of glimpse of my holiday, but it's already happening in Europe, so we're not completely behind. This is Veilog, which is a company owned by Segro. They have built a two-storey ramped-up warehouse, as they call it in Singapore, and that was let prior to practical completion to IKEA and Leroy Merlin. That is, that's 64,000 square meters of space. It's a huge facility, and as you can see here, there's a very gentle ramp that goes up to the first floor, and to be endorsed by IKEA and Leroy Merlin as a facility that properly works for them, I think that's fantastic. And it is, if you get a chance to go to Jean Villiers, do have a look there. But also very, very close to home, I was with MGH yesterday. I've been over a few times to have a look at their multi-level format. So they've got 3 facilities they've built in Munich. One of them is 30-year-old, and I went to see that yesterday, and it is still fit for purpose. This one is fully let. That was built 7 years ago, and there's another one in the north of Munich, which they are just about to complete. And it's so popular. I understand they virtually let all the space already. And in there, you've got people like Magazino, who do robotics for Amazon, and they're a research company, but they actually are doing the robotics. You've got a chocolatier, you've got a glazier, you've got a freight forwarder, you've got a whole group of people, but actually they're all together, they're all meshed together. So there's a bit of a clustering effect there. So this format we are looking at in the UK, and I'll come on to talk about that. But I think that the other thing just to say is that we're talking about e-commerce and the effect of that on the logistics market, but don't forget there is a whole group of uses. It doesn't matter if it's in the UK or if it's in mainland Europe. It's not just the e-tailers, the 3PLs, parcel distribution who are fighting for the accommodation. You've got a whole group of here. You've got food and beverage, you've got hospitality, you've got construction, self-storage, etc., etc. There's a lot of competition for these buildings, which and they can all accommodate within similar buildings when it gets closer to the urban and city fringes. I'm just going to go to my city, London, and just give you a little bit of an insight as to the challenges that we have, and I know this will relate to some of you in your cities. In London, we've got 8.4 million people at the moment. By 2040, we will have 10.8 million people. That's the projection. So, need more housing. 66,000 new homes are required year on year until 2040 to accommodate that increase in population. That's enormous. Where are we going to find that land? The industrial land has been taken for that type of use. It's 1,300 hectares of industrial land has been lost to residential since 2005. So there's a real issue at the moment in terms of providing housing, but at the same time, everyone needs to eat. They need to be clothed. If it's anything like my wife shops every day on Amazon, so there's lots of deliveries, not just our house, but lots of other houses. So there's a real issue there at the moment. So this stat I think is staggering, and this really does set the scene. In order to accommodate the housing and the demand that we're going to have from logistics, it's been estimated that 4 square metres of logistics space is needed for every new household that is coming in, being built into London. So if you work that out, that's 240,000 square metres year on year. That is a new logistics that is needed in London to accommodate that increased population. Which, in my language, that's 2.4 million square feet of space. If you bear in mind that Air 2 Jean Villiers building was 64,000 square metres. We need 4 of those year on year until 2040 to actually accommodate the demand. So some quite staggering facts. And just to sort of put it into context, this is online sales as a percentage of total retail sales in the UK. As you can see, 2008, 5% was online sales. 2018, 18%. So that is, we are all becoming more demanding. We want more goods, and we want it quicker. We need it now. So I've just got a little timeline here, and this is sort of across Europe, and it's not completely accurate, but back in 2008 there was a 2-storey building built at Heathrow, and gradually over time there's been some really good examples of multi-storey. But we had a call the other day, and one of my esteemed colleagues did say most of these buildings are pre-lets. They're built to suits. Speculative development hasn't really come forward, but it is starting to. So at the end here, these start to become speculative buildings. So there's a real commitment there to start to provide proper multi-storey accommodation. And I'm just going to give you a very quick run through of a couple. This is Gaisley's scheme at Silvertown, which is very close to London City Airport. This is the closest, I think, for a while we're going to see in London, which is going to be similar to Singapore, the Singapore type of product. And it's a fantastic example. It's beautifully located. It's going to really suit the last mile logistics operators. We're not actually marketing it, but I do know that already they've got some very good interest in terms of the people that you would expect would want to be very, very close. Two-way ramp up to the upper floors, three-storey, a different ramp solution, but every building has its own sort of characteristics. This is something in Park Royal, and if you don't know Park Royal is in northwest London. It is one of the major hubs just on the edge of the West End of London. There's 1,200 businesses within a mile and a half of this particular building. This is, hopefully we get planning consent for this any day now. That's 4 floors of that flatted factory type space. With cargo lifts, you can put a fully laden forklift into a cargo lift, go up to the 4th floor, trundle it out, and deliver to the door of an occupier. Well, you can see here exactly that. That could be any of the floors, the 4th floor. So that's really very exciting. That's going to be, it's not going to be let to one occupier. It's going to be a multi-occupier building, but there are going to be, there's going to be a whole group of types of occupiers there. This one is Prologis. Prologis bought this. This is an old building, and they're repurposing it for a multi-level solution. This is in Bromley by Bow, quite close to the Gaisley Silvertown building. They're about to start refurbishing that when the tenant, the previous owner leaves. The really interesting thing about this is, and we're going to talk about this in a while, the well-being of staff. And I know that Prologis are making a huge effort to ensure that the accommodation that is provided includes gyms, cafes, a terrace, collaboration areas. So it's going to be. It's an old building, but it's going to really start to provide the sort of accommodation and the facilities that the discerning workforce now are looking for. So this is co-location, and this is where we are seeing, and there's a lot of this going on in London. Just to say, there's about 25 multi-level, multi-storey schemes being thought of in London at the moment. This one here is built, and this is Travis Perkins at the ground floor. They're builders merchants, but it's one of their distribution centres, so it's a proper logistics space. You've then got what they call a podium, and then above it, they've actually got a number of floors of student housing. Now, clearly this works because you've got freight going on during the day, all the students are asleep, so you don't wake them up. So it works out pretty well. But there's lots of these that are now being looked at London. So it's real intensification of use on a single site. That's vertical. There's also side-by-side co-location, which is also being considered in certain sites, but most of them are quite tight. The JLL, which is Greater London Authority, are really, really focused on this. This is a massive tick box. You've got logistics with housing. That suits. That's going back to the issues that we have. Those staggering stats I provided. This is in Paris. This is consolidation centres. So this is Chappelle International. It really is quite. If you get a chance to see this, it's quite impressive. There's a rail terminal. It's a logistics centre. The really interesting thing is that DPD are the sole user of the actual logistics centre, and they are delivering to a whole group of people who subscribe to their services. So you've got control over the vehicles, you've got control over the activity, but and the other thing is that they are using electric vehicles. So again, that is where we sort of go into now. Very sustainable. They can deliver outside peak hours, so in terms of congestion, on the Paris streets, it's kept to a minimum. The other really interesting thing there, it's developed by Sogaris, who are certainly government influence. I know the government or the local authority has a proper part to play in that. but they've got residential, they've got a data center, they've got a basement cash and carry, a metro. So it's really intensified, but it's also consolidation as well. And just on that note, in London, in the square mile in the city, all new office buildings are in for planning. As part of the planning consent, the developer or the owner or the occupier has got to provide a proper consolidation solution to all of their deliveries and all their rubbish that's going to be taken out, their refuge. So they have got to come up with a solution before they actually take occupation. So there's some real focus on consolidation and trying to limit the effects of that building and its activity on the roads. So best practice for principles for location. I'm sure we're going to talk about this. Fairly straightforward. The one that I actually do want to pick out is well connected by public transport. Some research says that a forklift driver doesn't want to travel any more than 30 minutes. So they've got to, so if you've got to be close to your staff, you have got to make sure that you've got good connectivity, transport connectivity here. And the other thing is good access to power, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this because we were talking on the call the other day. Raymond certainly made it very clear that in terms of the need for automation and robotics, what do we need? We need an awful lot of power. So power is really becoming a real focus going forward. Just a bit of in terms of transport modes. I just put this up. Chappelle is rail connected, so that's good. So that's multimodal. Paris Air 2, that's on the River Seine. I don't think that the two occupiers are actually thinking of using the River Seine, but they could have done. And so we've got to start to look at alternative ways of delivering rather than just by the roads. I'm just going to finish off just with a bit about sort of well-being and just where I think that developers and landlords are going to have to start to think about their buildings going forward. There's the International Building Institute, and they've set out these 8 wells concepts, and it seems to me that over time, we're probably going to get to a point where developers are going to need to sort of get some sort of accreditation from wells in terms of, it's like BREEAM. It's a similar sort of thing, but it's really focusing in on the environment that is being provided for your workforce. So that I think is going to come through in at some point. I'm going back to my trip to Singapore as a final thing here. And these photographs were taken, the middle one, that is on the 5th floor of the toll building. And that is, obviously it's a garden, but you can walk round it, you can get rid of all your stress from the morning's riggers on the phone or whatever. You can go to the gym, you can go and have a nice meal in the restaurant. So occupiers now are certainly more focused on providing better facilities for their staff. And I showed that Prologis building. They're looking at these sort of facilities. And my final slide. This is Greenwich Drive, which I mentioned before. And I've actually taken this photo. I've got DHL here behind me, and then Sievers here, Kerry Logistics. There's Schenker further down. They're all multi-storey, they're all freight forwarders, and speaking to DHL, their major problems is staff retention. They're all paying sort of roughly the same per hour for their staff, but it is the extra things that are now being provided within the building that is really is the game changer. So I understand that there is a sort of a merry-go-round. As people say, well, I'm going to go to DHL because their restaurant's better, or I get a discounted lunch, or their gym's got a lot more equipment, or I can do more flexible working and I can get in earlier and have breakfast and then start working. So there's some real competition in Singapore, bearing in mind that they have very, very low unemployment. So all of these operators now are being tasked with actually providing better facilities, better amenities. Thanks very much for listening. I'll hand you back to Richard.